So you two dig up dinosaurs?
Oh.
Try to. Yo. 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 Yo.
Welcome to Jurassic Pod, a podcast 65 million years in the making. Oh, it's good to be back. In this show, we excavate, theorize, and decipher the evolution of the Jurassic Park films and their fandom. Wow, Mike, it's been a long time since we've been on this feed.
It feels like it's been 65 million years.
It does. If you're still subscribed, thank you. You can catch us over on the Least Important Things feed. So just search Least Important Things in your pod feed, wherever you subscribe to podcasts, and you can find us there. But we thought we'd come in here and say hello. Let me get the Jeff Goldblum off. But we decided to come in here because there's news. There is Jurassic Park movie.
It's actually been kind of a tumultuous Jurassic season in some ways.
It has been tumultuous, and news happened really quick. Like there was no news, and then it was like all of a sudden it was like all this news. So if you didn't know, which I'm sure you know, is there's going to be a new movie coming out in July of 2025, which feels extremely fast. But this all started with these rumors that were coming out about a director for the film. And first we had the first rumor that we had was David Leitch was going to be directing this movie. If you don't know his name, he is former action stunt coordinator turned director. Most famously did John Wick and a bunch of other films since then. So I think this was like within a month we had, okay, David Leitch is going to direct this new film, and then it fell apart. And then seemingly overnight, Gareth Edwards, the director of Rogue One, is the director that is in the helm in talks for a new Jurassic World film.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Crazy. And honestly, if you're a Jurassic fan, I think the news about Leitch like no longer being on the film was initially like kind of deflating.
Yeah, like, oh, here we go again. This is just going to be a Jurassic Park 3, as in the way it was produced. This is going to be a mess. And yeah, I agree.
And then kind of mourning that a little bit, and then coming in and hearing this news about Gareth Edwards, like honestly, like super encouraging. I mean, I imagine that there are plenty of Jurassic fans who are also big Star Wars fans as well, who know that of the movies made in the last 20 years, Rogue One, although kind of outside of the typical Star Wars movies, like is among the best Star Wars movies in the entire franchise. So super encouraging, I would say. Do we have I don't know, Luke, if you've even looked this up. Do we know who's writing this film?
I was about to bring it up. Great segue, Mike. We're getting back into it. We are fresh off the bench. It's like it was yesterday. We do. And this, I think, was actually released before the director news, if I remember the timeline correctly, which probably not. Listen to the Jurassic Park podcast if you want real reporting on this. But David Cope, the original screenwriter for Jurassic Park in the Lost World, is back. He's co-producing as well with Frank Marshall. If you don't know Frank Marshall, he did a bunch of stuff with Lucas and Spielberg, or Indiana Jones, Star Wars. So a great team. David Cope also penned Mission Impossible. Go on over to Podcast Impossible if you want to listen to us talk about that franchise. But that's also the 1-2 punches. Having Gareth Edwards and then David Cope writing it is super exciting.
Huge, honestly. And I think two things come to mind for me as a Jurassic Park fan. One, stoked. Like that's a dream team. That's exactly, as a Jurassic fan, whether you liked the Jurassic World series or not, for all of its plaudits and faults, you know, you really want the next installment to be something that you can be proud of, and this seems like the perfect way to start. Two, a concern I have is that the movie, this is just a concern as a Jurassic fan, the movie is going to rely too much on nostalgia, instead of creating something new. And I think as a Jurassic fan myself, I'll speak for myself. I want something new. I want a new idea in the Jurassic universe. Um, you know, obviously, like the bringing in elements of what we love about Jurassic, but something new, something fresh, something different. And so hopefully this team can bring some fresh ideas to the table.
And we know nothing about it. So to be clear, we know
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
really no they don't there's nothing confirmed of
And
any of the previous stars coming. All we know is that they're going to film in London and it's coming out in 2025. It kind of feels fitting to have this date already picked and barely have a director and somehow going to make this movie. It's very on par with the franchise, but it is exciting to get a high quality team. I agree. If Gareth Edwards can bring his mindset and his filter, the way he sees a franchise like he did with Rogue One, which I think is by far the best property or the best story created from the Disney era of Star Wars. If he brings that mentality, even half of that mentality and that mindset, I think we're in for a delightful film that's going to be fresh and feel new. What are your like two, in sports they always are like the Super Bowl ends and then it's like the way too early Super Bowl predictions or the way too early Oscar predictions. What are your way too early new Jurassic film predictions?
I way too early new Jurassic film predictions. That's a good question. I think hot take, no involvement from Jeff Goldblum.
I see that. I think there might not be any of the original cast involved in this. I don't actually think I don't think that any of the previous franchises there's going to be the same cast besides maybe minor characters.
I wouldn't be surprised if they told like almost like how almost like how Rogue One is not like in a chronological timeline to the rest of the Star Wars movies. I'm not saying that having Gareth Edwards as the Rogue One director means that this is going to happen. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if they told a story that fits in the timeline that we already have. That you know, because it kind of prevents them from having to create
go bigger.
Yeah, to go bigger. Yeah.
That's the best part about Rogue One is you are capturing and the Andor series, which I think is another one of the best things that Disney's created, is you're capturing a very grounded moment in this bigger world that's important. It has real stakes, but it's just a moment in time. It's a one mission. It's a team mission movie. If they can do that in this world of Jurassic, we don't know fully whether it's going to be after the previous film where dinosaurs are in the world or if they're going to go way back. Depends. I'm sure they're working on that. If we can just tell a contained story, I've always said that I would love a grounded like mission movie where there's like two dinosaurs, like where it's very intimate, where they're like whether it's raptors. I know that's never going to happen, but something like that. Or you have a film that's so grounded that it's not even about dinosaurs and it's about the politics. Almost like it would be a walk and talk, like an Aaron Sorkin movie. I think that's a really good idea for a Jurassic film that I hope Edwards does. And I think someone who came up with that idea, let's say maybe on a previous episode of Jurassic Pod, would be involved in the writing of that film. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
We had what, 3 or 4 good pitches?
I think so. I think there's ideas out there. Okay. We also know that there's somewhere out on the Reddit sphere, there's a Jurassic fan fiction novel that was written. It's easy enough to find if you do enough Googling. So there's certainly enough ideas out there.
Just take a listen to our draft episode for ideas. And maybe we need to do another one now. Maybe we need to do maybe not a draft episode, but a deeper episode on what we'd like to see. Maybe we can get Daniel from Stuck on Sorna to come in and pontificate of what this could be. But very exciting. That's why we're here. That's why we jumped back into the feed, because even though we're late, we're not first to this news, but we're to the news. Like, we're talking about it. And that's the most important thing, is that we're actually talking about it, even if it's a month late. Hey, so the day after we recorded, we found out, the news came out that Scarlett Johansson is in negotiations to be the lead in the new Jurassic film. This is why we don't do a news show. We leave the news to Brad over at the Jurassic Park podcast. Anywho, thought I'd give our 2 cents here. Mike was excited. Of course, we texted about this immediately when it came out. I think this shows, based off of our conversation, that getting a star like this, a big star, shows that there probably isn't going to be a lot of legacy characters, if any at all, which for us is exciting. So if they get this over the line, pretty awesome to see Scarlett Johansson lead a Jurassic film. Now, what it's going to look like, that's another conversation, but I think there's a lot to be excited about with this news. So we have positive momentum, we're moving forward, and we're getting to movie in 2025. So very exciting. Thought I'd just give my little commentary. Again, this is why we don't do a news show. We do late news, but I'm sure there's more coming, which is very exciting. All right, back to the episode.
Well, we had to wait. We had to wait because I just got back from Universal this past week.
Yes, which is the segue, and which is also why we're jumping back in, because Mike went to the Mecca, the Holy Land, the world within a world, which is Universal. Okay, see, this is where I'm already falling apart. Did you go to you didn't go to Universal Studios? You went to Universal Florida Park.
Well,
world.
Universal Studios Florida is, I still believe, an operating like production studio.
Okay.
I believe. But they also have the 2 theme parks there, amongst some other properties that they own. But they have the main theme park that opened in 1990, which is Universal Studios Florida. And then right connected, but also right next door, is Universal Studios Islands of Adventure, which is their second gate.
Which I remember from the Nickelodeon commercials in the early 2000s.
That park opened in 1999.
Okay.
So children of a certain vintage, Luke and I are in that vintage. Universal Studios was a big part of our media, like what we took in. So there's a lot of nostalgia that's built around that, especially if you grew up with Nickelodeon. You're very familiar with that, which, by the way, that building no longer is themed like that. It's totally something different now, and it has been for quite a while. But anyway, yeah, so I went to both parks this past week with my wife. The Jurassic Park kind of theming and all the rides for that and everything that has to do with Jurassic is in Islands of Adventure.
Okay. So it's not again, I know nothing, and this is why it's fun to talk about this. So it's not like Harry Potter, where it's like a Jurassic World, like it's separate, or is it, what is it like?
It's like a themed area. So like,
okay.
So like you, and there's a picture, and maybe we could put it up on Least Important Things. I don't know, but there's a picture of me standing in front of what is like the Jurassic Park gate. And it's very like you would very recognizable, and it is like, well, you walk into a themed area and there's dining and shopping that's all themed like Jurassic, and you have the main rides in that area, which are the Jurassic Park River Ride, which is
and that one is in California, right? It was first in California.
First in California.
Look at me, Mike. I know things. Things.
So the river ride is phenomenal. It's actually one of 2 river rides that Luke and I are going to talk about tonight over 2 different podcast recordings. But that notwithstanding, so the Jurassic Park River Ride, which is a classic, and then you have the Velocicoaster, which just opened a couple years ago, which is a very I'm going to say a very intense roller coaster.
Like Cedar Point for the Midwesterner listeners, like hardcore roller coaster.
Yeah, it's a great roller coaster. should I go into just talking about the Velocicoaster? Because that's like
Yeah,
the main thing. So
yeah, because that pulled you in. Would you call yourself a ride warrior?
no, I wouldn't actually. I tend to get motion sick on a lot of rides, especially rides with inversions. So a lot of roller
Yes.
coasters that go upside down are difficult for me, which is unfortunate. I also have a lot of anxiety with roller coasters, which is really just adrenaline, but I mask it as anxiety. So um so there are some roller coasters that I just avoid entirely. But the
Yeah.
Velocicoaster was a coaster that I was intent on riding. It was in fact the first ride, like when the park opened, it was the first ride we went to. It was one of the main reasons we were there. Um, and if you have been on the Velocicoaster, if you've been to Universal Studios Florida, you know this coaster is not to be messed with. Like
It
it's
lives up
full
to the name.
steps. It
Like
really
you're not
does.
naming a Velocicoaster and having it be like this little joy ride, like
Yeah.
riding the train or something.
Yeah. And it opened to much fanfare and it's received many accolades as being a phenomenal roller coaster. Is it the world's best roller coaster? No. But I've seen many people who are like YouTubers, who are into like who are ride warriors. They'll consistently rank this coaster as, top 50, top 75 coasters in the United States or even in the world. So it's definitely worth its medal, um,
Now,
as a
are
coaster.
there like raptors that like jump up, or is it
So
more
the
just like
theme, I
painted
don't want to,
blue?
I won't like, there aren't really many spoilers to this ride. There are rides that you can spoil, but this ride, basically the backdrop of it is it's themed as a ride. Like it's themed like as you're waiting in the queue, you have Claire and Owen who Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt filmed
As part of
stuff.
their contract, probably.
And Dr. Wu, what's the actor's
Wow.
name? Played Dr.
Oh,
Wu. Um,
we're
I
rusty.
forget
We're
his
rusty
name. His
friends. So
name.
lovers, not experts.
Yeah. So I mean these guys had filmed bits. They even did a Mr. DNA bit for the ride.
Brilliant.
So the theming of the queue is phenomenal, as is to be expected with Universal.
Which is great because you're in a Jurassic Park ride in a
Yep.
Jurassic Park
And
section of
chances
the
are,
park, and it's a park.
yeah, and chances are that if you're riding this, you're going to be waiting a while anyway, so why not be entertained?
Yeah.
But so yeah, theming was great, and it is themed like a ride. It's themed to it buys into this idea that you are actually waiting in line to ride a ride at Jurassic Park.
Yes.
And so that is kind of the theming behind it, and which I thought was very clever. So great job by the Universal creative team who designed the ride and the coaster, to come up with that story. And then the idea is that you are actually loading onto a state-of-the-art piece of vehicle, a
Yeah.
state-of-the-art vehicle that is to protect you and keep you safe, for the experience of basically running with raptors is what it's supposed to
That's
simulate the
brilliant.
experience of. It is. It's really good, and the theming of that is perfect. In fact, it's a launch coaster, so the way that kind of works is it's not a typical chain lift up to the top of the hill. It's a launch coaster, so you actually get launched at a high speed,
Dang.
i.e., Velocicoaster, and the way the
Oh,
ride
oh,
kind of
velocity.
yes.
Just got it.
Yeah, and this is just how the ride starts. So this is not really a spoiler, but the kind of the way the ride starts is you're sitting waiting to be launched, and at either side of you are like screens showing raptors getting ready to sprint out into their pen, and
Oh, that's
you get
cool.
launched out with them, and then that's the beginning of the ride. And the theming of the ride is just phenomenal. I will say this about the coaster. It is the most airtime, which is a thing that roller coaster people will understand. It is the most,
That term scares me. That airtime at a roller coaster, that feels
yeah.
like you're off the track in the air.
It's
But that's
that's
not
what
what
it
it
feels
is.
like. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
So it's the most airtime I've ever felt on a coaster. And after riding, I had every intention of riding it twice, but I got sick on a ride later on in the day, and also just the wait time was
Not worth it.
yeah, not worth it. And but I had even then, even if the wait time was worth it, I would have thought, I don't know, that was quite intense for me. I wasn't going to ride it again, but I was very happy that I didn't, that I rode it. So I guess all this to say, this is just the theming of the Velocicoaster. The whole park, not the whole park, but this whole area of Jurassic is themed perfectly. They have a replica of the Jurassic Park, like I don't know what to call it, a
Gate.
clubhouse.
Oh,
Not the gate, but like
the
the
home. Yeah.
building,
Yeah.
the building that you can see from anywhere else in the park, which is brilliant.
That is brilliant.
So it really feels like you are in Jurassic Park, and they have various themed elements. They have, I will say, I like there's not a lot for like really young kids, other
Yeah.
than like there are some areas, but there aren't like a ton of rides, I didn't think, for young kids. But there's plenty for kids to do. So
Right.
anyway, if you're a Jurassic fan or a movie fan, Universal Studios, it's an expensive trip, but the product is very much worth it. And that's even coming from me. I much prefer Disney World, but I absolutely understand and appreciate the value that Universal provides as entertainment for theme parks. So if you are a theme park person, if this sounds interesting to you, you should definitely put it on your list.
I think it's probably, I'm just realizing that, and listeners, if you haven't listened to Jurassic Pod or any of our other rewatch podcasts, I'm not a theme park person. I appreciate them, but it's not what I'm going to spend my time on. This is the first time where I've heard someone talk about a IP, intellectual property themed park ride or area, and it makes sense to me because the world of Jurassic Park, this whole franchise is based on the theme park idea. So it makes sense that you would have a theme park themed like Jurassic Park because it makes sense in world. It's immersive. Yeah. And it totally makes sense. It like you're living the actual film closer than any other thing. No like Wizarding World like Star Wars, because like there's not wizards. There's not Star Wars doesn't exist. Like you're not on like Jakku. But it makes sense. It's actually, as silly as it sounds grounded. Yeah. Even the river ride, which is a classic, and has been refurbished a couple times over the years. It's a flume ride, which means it ends in a drop that you do get somewhat like
wet
a
in,
log flume.
Yeah, you don't really get
this
that
is my
wet.
roller coaster tycoon knowledge coming through.
Yeah, it's like a log ride, but it's you're loaded into a boat, and the way the ride kind of begins is very much like how the movies begin, which is you're on a tour to see all of these different types of animals and to be educated on what they are. And then the ride has its own kind of twists and turns, if you will, just like a river does. So I won't spoil any of that, but it is a great ride. You don't really get wet on it. You do get some water, but it's not like you don't need to wear a swimsuit. No, not at all. Yeah. So anyway, and we have a clip. We do. Can you set this clip up for us? I did some recording of myself in line because I knew if I didn't, Luke, you would be very upset. Yes, so we need the content. I tried to do some recording. So this is a clip of me waiting in line for the Velocicoaster, but kind of commenting on some of the queue elements that are in the ride. All right, Luke, I'm in line for Velocicoaster. This is a before, about 20 to 30 minutes before we board. Got some pictures. There's some like raptors over here you can hardly see. They're like caged up. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I'll check in. All right, leaving the ride. They took my phone, so I wasn't able to do anything about that. But it was crazy. I fixed my hair already, but our hair was straight back, and I'm trying to find our picture. But Luke, the ride was phenomenal. There we are. Hold on, let me see if I can flip this. Well, you probably won't see it. There I am.
that picture on the bottom left, 47A. So, anyway, ride was phenomenal. It was very intense. Very intense roller coaster, but it was great. I'll film more later from inside Jurassic World. We got more rides to go to, so peace out.
You can only get that type of content here on Jurassic Pod. And you told me that they confiscated your phone, so we weren't able to get a follow-up. So you just have to imagine.
Yeah. So yeah, because the ride has so many inversions, and Universal appears to have at least
like upside down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just helping the layperson if you don't know these
There's
terms.
a lot of zero-G elements to this ride, and so things can go flying out of people's pockets, and Universal seems to have, at least in my opinion, a very protective view of guest safety, almost to a fault, and some may say. And so they required that if you were going to ride, that everything that was on you, keys, phone, wallet, doesn't matter if it's loose in your pocket or if it's loose on your body, it had to be locked up before the ride. So I wasn't able to keep my phone long enough to do a follow-up. And by the time I got off the ride, my hair had returned to normal. It had been pushed back quite severely. Shannon wishes she had a picture, but yeah.
I think we need to go back. You're convincing me to go. Out of all the theme park things, this is the first time where I'm like, I would actually go do that.
So I feel like
Universal will sponsor the trip. Thank you, Universal, and we will get more footage.
Yes, I tried to work that out while we were there, and I did make some headway. So
you just started asking random Universal workers, like, so I got this
members.
podcast, like what's the deal? Can we get an influencer? Like,
as soon as I said that sentence to start, I've got this podcast, they were immediately checked out, actually.
Well, friends, so much good stuff happening in the Jurassic world, pun intended. But we're also here to talk about one other thing we have done, Jurassic Pod, of course, which is obviously still ongoing now that we have a new movie coming out. We've done Podcast Impossible on the Least Important Things feed, and we are doing a new rewatch series that's kicking off on drumroll. Has a relation to do with what Mike was saying earlier about rides in the rivers. Podcast of the Caribbean, which is a rewatch series on the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, which is also a theme park based franchise.
A little bit different, you know, the Jurassic Park rides were made after the movie, but the Pirates of the Caribbean movie was based on a ride. So a little bit of a, difference there.
So if you want to listen to us talk and rewatch that entire series and dive deeper into theme park rides and interesting choices by directors, please join us on the Least Important Things feed. But we will also drop the first episode in the Jurassic Pod feed, so you are reminded. Mike, any last words to our Jurassic Pod listeners, if there's any of you out there?
I'm thinking our next effort should be a live podcast from the Velocicoaster.
Yeah, and me being terrified because if Mike says he gets a little nauseous on roller coasters, I haven't gotten on a roller coaster in probably 10 years because the last one I went on, I was like severely sick. So
wow.
It sounds like great content, Universal. Come on, make it happen. All right, friends, we'll talk to you soon, either on Podcast Impossible, Jurassic Pod, or Podcast of the Caribbean. Stay tuned.
Goodbye.
Stay subscribed.